All right, so let's get started. What we're talking about here in schematic and 3D is four different areas of different information that I want to pass by you. There wasn't an easy way to actually break this apart. So because of that, what I ended up doing was creating a section for new settings, a section for some new functions, and then doing some updates and review, and then getting into PLCs. Now, with the PLCs, it is a bit of review, but at the same time, it is something that I feel is worthwhile for most people to be able to see. So that being the case, let's just go right into that first one. And when we are talking about the new settings, what I am looking at is that we're going to look at some global drawings styles. We're going to look at some location and function outline formulas, being able to have the software know whether you want to use the missing marks and doing the sorts, or if you're looking for not doing those. And I'll explain that a little bit further when we get into it. And then, of course, just a little bit with the multi-level marks for the terminals here. So let's just jump right into it. First of all, with the global drawing settings, these are going to be located under your project in the configurations area. So when you normally drop down in the past, you had it going from project to wire styles. Now we've got this drawing styles available, and you should be seeing some stuff coming along with this in the future here. But for right now, it works just like any other template. If you look at the properties, you can right now add your layers. So any layers that you might have in the project template, you can now make them global. The same thing with your line styles and your text styles. I would be looking for in the service packs coming out in the future that you should also be able to see your wire styles, which the wire styles obviously are something right now that are created in each project, and that's the only way that you can transfer them. The second one, of course, is this location outline formula. So right now, you know that under your marks, that's where you have the location formulas. Here now you have the location outline formula and the function outline formula. So when you are making those boxes in your drawing sets, you can now call those out differently than just the location. Let's look at where these unused marks are. So there are three new sections here. Notice that you've got this assigned unused mark. You can make it for the wires, so wires that you want to skip. You don't have to use the next number if you're doing sequential. And the same thing holds true for cables and components. So when you select this mark, then you actually start using those. We also have another section here for sorting the mark, whether it's automatic or whether it's natural. This being a case that you're possibly wanting to sort differently than what's set up. Lastly, of course, is the separator for the multi-level terminal mark. You are utilizing a break symbol, or you could use one of the other symbols in the drop-down for utilizing that section. And then I'll get into it just a little bit further in the next section here. So when we're talking about new functions, now I realize I'm going a little bit fast, but there's really only a few areas here to end up looking at. Under the new functions, one of the things, and this is probably my favorite area, is going to be creating a custom class. Before, you were always forced to use the classes that were selected by the software. Now you have the capability of being able to make your own. We're also talking about terminal strip parts. You'll be able to add your own. And then we're going to talk about this distributed mode. Now this distributed mode is something new, never been talked about before, so I'll show you a little bit more about that as well. So first thing, of course, is this custom properties. Now, as you know, with the custom properties, In order to get to the custom properties, you would go to your library, and under the library, you would then find that custom classification manager. Now with the custom manager, you will find that all of the icons are green. Now when they are green, that is showing that these are something that were created here by the software. You can go ahead and utilize a new class, and when you make that, you're going to be creating your own description, you're going to be creating your own component type. You are going to also create more information here as far as what the generics are for your 3D footprint, or your 3D part, your 2D footprint, and areas like that. And then once you have that placed, it is then there for assignment that you can then utilize and be able to assign. Now, the next area that we are going to be looking at here is the terminal strip parts. With the terminal strip parts, you can now add parts directly to the terminal strip by going into the terminal strip properties. When you do this, it is going to allow you to then assign manufacturers parts like your end anchors, anywhere that you might, any of those parts that you might utilize. Now those parts you can then go ahead and create. In this case here, we're going to just create some additional terminals because I want to show you how these terminals work. When you are utilizing the terminals, you can create your terminal strip. I'm going to do some terminal strips so that I'm using the multiple here. So I'm going to actually reassign the terminal to that first terminal so that I am actually making multiple levels. Now when you first assign it, you'll notice that the numbering is not taking place, but you can immediately see that physically the terminal has changed as far as configuration. By looking at the terminal strip editor, you can see that there are 3 levels now with the terminal. At the same time, I am going to want to do something with the numbering. So by selecting the define level, you can tell the terminal how it is going to be numbered, and then it automatically will populate. Lastly, under our process, you can find this thing called deferred update mode. It will give you an icon as you select it for activating. This is going to cache your changes so that you are only making changes, not continuously pinging your SQL. So it will tell you that you are in deferred mode, but you can force the SQL to then make change or to update. So what you're talking about here is that when you start drawing, the software in the past has always been continuously pinging your SQL. Now, while you are drawing, it is making a ping, but not continuously. So therefore, the traffic is less. You can force it again by just going ahead and hitting that update connections. When you do, you will see those notifications in your lower right-hand corner as far as if you are in live mode, or if you forced an update, or if you are in deferred mode. If anybody needs to see any of these further, please don't hesitate to give us a call and we can walk through that. Next, we are talking about updates and reviews. Now these updates and reviews, what I am looking at doing is just a couple of real short things here. The first is opening a project. The next would be these snapshots and managers, which some of you may or may not be already aware of. And then of course thirdly would be in the electrical 3D, the electrical wizard. which already is there, but at the same time, some changes have been made to that. So let's just go ahead right into the software. And here what I want to do is when I open up a project, you will see that automatically I get this open recent drawings. This becomes a nuisance if you don't want it, but you can select yes or no or check the box for turning it on or off. It's sometimes handy. The next, of course, we are talking about being able to look at the snapshots. Now, the snapshots, a snapshot is an archive of a project at any point in time. What you have available under this manager is you have the availability of doing per version to create a snapshot, or by creating it by a specific date from the last version. This is a nice reminder, especially if you're doing lots of changes, to be able to archive that project quickly. So in order to do that, you would just go ahead and select the Take Snapshot of your project at any point in time, and it will allow for you to be able to create a rollback. Notice that the file size is very small, so that it's not giving you a whole lot of memory allocation that it requires. It does reside in the project, but then at the same time you can now create projects from those rollbacks in case something gets corrupted, in case something gets changed that you don't want changed. Lastly, we're talking about the 3D electrical wizard. In 2018, they have moved it so that now when you go to the electrical component wizard, it automatically now goes to the entire routing capabilities here. So you'll see that you still have the same type of things for your connection points with the manufacturer's part or with the circuit or with the cable, but at the same time you could do standard routing. Here now I'm moving over into 2017, so just to show you the difference. So in the electrical component wizard here, it automatically just went straight to those areas. So you are going to go just to the routing wizard now that is handled in both 2D and 3D when you start going to 2018. All right, those are so far the enhancements that I can show you. There are some that are coming out. They will be later on in the year. So at this point, I don't really want to show those to you until they are fully set up, but I can let you know that electrical schematic has a connector to EPDM that allows the use of data cards for all of your manufactured parts that are in your libraries. And this will allow you to also archive your projects, but it won't have the rigidness that you have right now. And then, of course, there will be some added functionality with that. Lastly here, I'm going to go ahead and get into the fun with the PLCs. Now, this area, I am covering just how you manage those variables and then being able to apply them into the formulas, where they actually come from, because I know a lot of people have had lots of questions about this. So I also want to show you how you can then propagate those I/O numbering to the equipotential wire numbers, as well as then push them from the wires to your terminals. So here with the PLC, we're just going to get started by going ahead and creating a manufacturer's part and then some modules. Right here, I've got just a couple that are set up that are based off of just some standard downloads that I have added. So I'm going to add this first module. I'm going to add two more. I'm going to add an input card and an output card just to give it some more flexibility here, but be able to show more of this to you. Now, the first part of this is to realize that with each of these manufacturer's parts, these first two fields, the card's position in the slot, are normally populated by the PLC. They can also come from the manufacturer's part. When you are bringing it from the manufacturer's part, you have to be careful because, of course, you want that flexibility from the software, so you don't want it overwritten. And go into the circuits and terminals. I can see that for any specific input or output, I have this area here for a physical address. This I normally set up when I am first creating this part in the library so that I have it available for use with the formula when we are using that component value, the component values, and with the physical address field for the formula. The next part, of course, is the fact that you have this formula. Now the formula, of course, people look for it and say, okay, I don't know how to quite make this work. Well, let me tell you that the first thing I do is I go into these variables and simple formulas. And I am going to use the PLC manufacturer's part address from the physical address. And I'll show you where this is coming from. It's actually coming from the physical address of the manufacturer's part. So I created in that part an N00 and an N01 as the physical part. And then what I'm going to do here is just take the left first variable, or the left first digit of whatever that said. So instead of N00, it's going to take the I, and it's now going to add this colon. And where the second part is coming from is, notice that the variables match up between this set here from the manufacturer's data in the manager or the formula, also into the properties. So card's position is component value 1, index for I is component value 3, Q index is component value 4. Because the first two positions are always populated by the PLC, I am going to start using component value 3 so that I can control, because you've probably got those devices when you are dropping in of, say, a card position of maybe it's 2, but it's split between inputs and outputs, and you want it to actually be number 2 as far as your I/O. So you want to be able to have that flexibility, and by you controlling it using this component value 3, you will then be able to utilize whatever you put in for that. And then here what I'm doing is taking the right side of my PLC physical address, but I'm taking the last 2 digits on the right. So when I test this out, if my physical address in my manufacturer's part is input, or actually N02, and then I'm going to type in a value, say maybe the card is position number 3. By doing this, notice that in the results, I actually see the outcome that I am looking for. So this looks pretty good. I'll go ahead now and process this into my PLC, but I want to make sure that I save this formula. Normally you could always do the Control-C if you wanted to, but hitting the Save Formula, it's going to bring it up for you so that you have it now available in other modules when you start adding them. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say OK to update that manufacturer's part. And now if you notice, my originals were set up for that N00, but I'm going to go ahead and type in this first module 04. I'm going to add that specific formula that I just created. And now when I do, you will notice that that 04 is then allowed to be in this physical address. So that's the first part of this, is that by being able to do this, you can do this in the PLC Manager. I have found you can actually do it in 2018 in component properties without actually even getting into the manager. So that makes it even more flexible there. You don't have to worry when you generate those drawings that you can go ahead and look at any specific device, and just by simply highlighting that symbol, you can then go ahead and change that value on the fly. And when you change it on the fly, the variable is then going to change, the formula is actually going to change right away. So here I'm going to do it through component properties instead. I have found in past versions that you could not do this. You actually had to do it in the PLC manager. In 2018, they did fix that, where you can actually do that now without having to create or to go into that PLC manager to do any further editing. So that being the case here, I also want to now show you how you can do this propagation. So I'm going to just draw a couple extra wires here. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw some terminals as well, because of course with the terminals, I want to be able to push the wire numbers to those terminals after I push this PLC. So for the first part here, let's just go ahead and number some wires. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and draw a couple of do the first propagation here just to show you what this is like. So to do a propagation, you go to Process, you go to the Propagate Data, you're going to add a propagation and select whether it is a PLC channel or where it is coming from. You are then going to push it to the equipotential, to the mark. By doing so, you can then go ahead and update these wire marks and say, okay, so notice immediately from 1, 2, and 3, I now get the I/O numbers. Let's just go ahead and add some more terminals now. And these terminals, I will just go ahead and just use standard terminals. I'm not going to go ahead and utilize the multi-level terminal at this point. I'm going to go ahead and now push the same thing through this process of propagation. I am now going to create a second propagation from the equipotential mark. I am going to go ahead and push that to the terminal mark. And by doing that, I will now be able to have my terminal show up with those I/O numbers. So immediately it updates and changes those. All right, that concludes what I have, and have a fantastic day. Hopefully, if there's any other questions, please, I would like you to not hesitate, but to go ahead and let us know by contacting us at tech support at decisolutions.com. We can be reached from 8 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time till 8 o'clock in the evening p.m. Eastern Time, just because we are on the west side of the coast as well. Thanks for joining, and we'll talk with you later. Have a great day.